Okay guys, today we're going to learn what might be a much easier way to solve quadratics, okay? It's called the quadratic formula, okay? So, here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to do some review problems. So first you need to solve each of these three by completing the square. This will probably take you a little bit of time, but you're lucky Mr. Strange was pretty nice to you here. I gave you ones that really kind of work pretty easily, okay? So yes, you do have to divide that initial coefficient, but do those, pause, and then come back and we'll see what you got. Okay, I'm assuming you've done that. Remember, first thing in all of these, I'm just going to quickly show you. Again, we're doing the same thing. We got to get rid of that initial coefficient because it's a pain in the buns to complete the square without it. So, do it. Okay, so I divided everything by that initial coefficient. Here I get x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Add 8 to both sides. X squared plus 2x equals 8. Complete the square. 1 completes the square. Factors into, oops, add 1 to this side too. This factors into x plus 1 squared. And that side's 9. See, look, I gave you pretty whole numbers. How nice am I? Look at that. So we get x plus 1 over here, an absolute value, and 3. So we get x plus 1 equals 3, or negative 3. I know I'm breezing through this quick, but pause and kind of think about any of the steps if you need to. That's an easy thing to do. That's what the pause button's for. And we get x equals 2, or negative 4. Hopefully the rest of these were just as straightforward. Let's see how nice Mr. Strange was to you. So divide x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. If you subtracted 9 from both sides only to add it back again, that's funny. I made you do an extra few steps. This is already a perfect square trinomial. Hopefully you're getting better at recognizing them. The decimal ones are hard to see, but this should be easy. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. So this one's already good. X plus 3 squared equals 0. This is kind of a fun one because when you take the square root of both sides, yes, you get this in an absolute value. But since there's no way to have positive or negative 0, the absolute value is just kind of irrelevant. We only get one answer of x equals negative 3. Kind of cool. One last one. X squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Add the 5 to both sides. Then complete the square. 4 will complete the square. Oh my gosh, I gave you just another beautiful, perfect square over on the other side. So when we take the square root, we're not going to be dealing with any messy decimals. It's like I wanted to take it easy on you for these practice problems or something since I was making you do 3 review problems. So hopefully you did them instead of just kind of watching me do them like some of you do and not pausing and trying to do them yourself. But I can't stop you from doing that. Okay, so you get x minus 2 equals 3 or negative 3. Add 2 to both sides. You get x equals 5. You get x equals negative 1. Huzzah. Now, I left this section on here for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to show you how to come up with this formula here. And 2, this is what I did last year. Okay, last year I actually had groups solve for the quadratic formula. Basically, here's the idea. What we're going to do is we're going to take a generic equation. What you are doing up here is solving specific equations by completing the square. What we're going to do is make it a more generic one now. We're going to say, let's pretend that we had an equation, a quadratic trinomial, with coefficients of a, b, and c. I want you to solve that equation for x. Okay, you obviously can't work in pairs or groups of 3 unless you're at school right now, in which case feel free to go ahead and give this a try. It's really cool. So basically, you need to do the exact same steps that you did above. So like, look what I did here. What I do first, what I do second, what I do third, what I do fourth. Okay, and try doing your best to solve that equation for x. You're going to get 2 different values in there. But see what you can do. If you can figure it out, great. If not, I'm about to show you how to get a formula that is going to save you a bunch of work. Okay, hopefully you did take some time to try it on your own, because it's really cool if you can get it on your own. I'm serious. Like, if you haven't, seriously, pause it right now and do it. It is so just awesome if you can figure out this awesome formula on your own. If you did, let's see if you match what I got. Okay, so I'm looking up at those first problems. Like in problem A, my first thing I did was divide by 5. I don't have a 5, I have an A though. I'm going to divide everything by A. When I distribute that, I get x squared, because A divided by A is just 1, plus B over A times x, plus C over A. Okay, then I'm looking, the next thing that I did in the first problem was I had a minus 8 at the end, so I got that over to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing here. I need this coefficient to the other side, so I'm going to subtract C over A. And here is where it is about to get funky. So, I got negative C over A here. Yikes. I need to now complete the square and add a number here and add that same thing over to the other side. Well, I'm looking up there. What I did is I took half of what my middle number was and I squared it. So half of B over A, if I want to figure out what half of that is, I just divide it by 2. So that's B over 2A. If I want to square it, I multiply it by itself. B times B is B squared. And 2A times 2A is 4A squared. So I'm going to add B squared over 4A squared to both sides. If you're not entirely getting this, don't worry about it. I'm not going to force you to ever derive. That's what we're doing now. We're coming up with this formula. I'm never going to force you to come up with the quadratic formula. Okay, it's just a cool thing that you can do. You know, and I like that it jives with what we've already done. So now I need to factor. I get x plus b over 2a here, because it's always half of that middle term, squared, equals, oh my gosh, gross ugly mess. I need a common denominator over here to be able to add these together. So if you're thinking like, if you're thinking in terms of like GCFs here, this is kind of where this could be helpful. This one's 4 times A times A. So if I multiply this by a 4 and an A, I'll get 4A squared. But if I multiply this denominator by a 4 and an A, I got to do the same thing up here. Okay? So what I end up getting is negative 4AC plus B squared all over 4A squared. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Here is the, if you thought all those other parts were the tricky parts, holy buckets, here's the tricky part. I get the absolute value of x plus b over 2a. One thing that you may have learned about square roots is that if you take the square root of the top and the bottom of a fraction separately, that's okay to do. So the square root of my top, there's literally nothing I can do with that. Except what I'm going to do is I'm going to reorder these two things. And I'm going to write b squared minus 4ac instead. And then the square root of 4a squared, I actually kind of know already what that is because it came from 2a times 2a, so that's just 2a. Okay, now I need to split this up into two equations, but rather than splitting it up into one with a positive version of this and one with a negative version of this, I'm just going to write a plus or minus symbol to show that this could be positive or negative. Then what I'm going to do is one last thing, subtract b over 2a from both sides. What's really cool is that those have a common denominator already. So I just leave my over 2a here, and then I combine the negative b plus or minus this mess, and I get negative b, or the opposite of b, if you will, plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. I'm going to write it bigger right now, okay, but this, ladies and gentlemen, negative x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a is what we call the quadratic formula. What you have to do now is you have to look at, hey, where did this come from? Well, it came from solving an equation that was ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So here's how you use this. You're going to get a quadratic formula, a quadratic equation, and you're going to set it equal to, make sure it's equal to 0. Once it's equal to 0, you're going to use the x squared coefficient, and you're going to plug that in for the a's into the formula, the x coefficient into the b's, and the constant coefficient in for c. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm literally only going to do one problem because I'm hoping you're just going to get it. So hopefully you know what those answers were from the first page. Let's take a look at kind of what we get here. So we have a quadratic equation equal to 0. Remember, it came from ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So if I kind of match things up, my a is 5, my b is 10, my c is negative 40 because it's supposed to be a plus. Now all I do is I take the quadratic formula and I replace all my a's with 5s, my b's with 10s, and my c's with negative 40s. Here we go. Negative 10 plus or minus. B squared is 10 squared, so that's 100. Minus 4. I like doing the squaring right when I put it in there because that's easy, so that number should always be positive. 4 times 5 times negative 40. All divided by 2 times a. Now you just have to simplify. So we get negative 10 plus or minus 100 plus 20 times 40 is 800 all over 10. Keep going, we get negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 900. Take the square root of 900, that's 30. Now, you just kind of break this up into 2, just kind of like we do our absolute value stuff. Negative 10 plus 30 over 10, negative 10 minus 30 over 10. Simplify each of those. 20 over 10 is 2. Negative 40 over 10 is negative 4. Look at the front side. Negative 4 and positive 2. Negative 4 and positive 2 over here too. Yeah, that's it. Cool, right? Okay, so if you didn't, guys, if you didn't get how I got the formula from all this, if you didn't get all this, that's okay. Not everybody's going to get it. In fact, I'd say not a whole ton of you will, especially kind of the first time. It's the first time we're going through all this stuff. But if you don't get it, that's okay. I'm going to summarize what you need to know. You need to memorize this formula. And the other thing you need to memorize is that this only works when you have a quadratic equation equal to 0. Only works when you have a quadratic equation equal to 0. All you do is you plug your coefficients in for A, B, and C, and then you simplify. Okay, it's a cool, nifty formula. It saves you time, and you know, maybe the thing to discuss in your group is when is the ideal situation to use what are good situations to use the quadratic formula versus completing the square. Might be a cool thing to do. That's it for this video. Sorry it was a little long.